Are we live?
Okay, we are live.
We're live.
Hi.
Hello, people of the internet. We are your authors for the evening.
Yes.
I am Brandon, and this is Dan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan. Nice to meet you. You look great tonight.
This isn't frame.
Oh, you were Dan was in frame? Yeah.
What?
I turned on the wrong camera. They're just sitting there.
What?
Not used to the 3-camera setup.
Okay. The lovely young lady who is not me is actually my daughter. That is my eldest child and heir to my throne, which at this point will probably just be debt. Anyway, my name is Dan Wells, and I write a bunch of books, and I've known Brandon forever.
Yeah?
So here we are.
Dan's known me longer than my wife has known me.
Not as much total time in
Yeah.
contact with each other.
Probably not.
But
I hope
yeah.
not.
Same story with my wife, actually.
Really? No. When did I meet you?
98.
And you weren't married yet?
No, I got
Okay.
married super fast.
Okay.
So, I came home from
Right,
my
you were roommates with
mission.
Ben when I met you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Came home in summer of 98, started at BYU in the fall, and Brandon and I were both on staff of The Leading Edge, which is BYU's science fiction magazine, which was amazing, and I loved it.
Yep. We took a class from Dave Wolverton together, and then started a writing group together. And whenever I
Yeah.
talk about my friend Dan, I am talking about him.
Prior to that class, Brandon was just the weird guy who worked downstairs.
Yes.
Because the magazine, it was a student magazine in a small building that doesn't even exist anymore, called the Crandall House West. And all the editing people were upstairs and production people were downstairs. And very rarely did the two mix. But then we met in a creative writing class.
Yep.
And Dave Wolverton basically just said, "Who here is serious about publishing?" And I raised my hand and Brandon raised his hand and we saw each other across the room and like, "Oh yeah, that guy." And started a writing group.
And now it's been 22 years.
Yes.
And now we are
And
old.
we're actually published. That magazine, Leading Edge magazine, I have gone to bat. I have spoken to college administrators about it. It has produced more professionals in its field than any other magazine on the campus.
Yep.
Bar none.
Absolutely. And it's kind of, I always talk about, it's kind of weird, but kind of not, that we broke in together, because Dan basically got me published, and then I basically got Dan published, right? Because we were going to conventions together, and he introduced me to an editor he'd found. The editor did not buy his thing, but bought my thing. But then years later, I said to the editor, "Hey, you remember that guy? He wrote a really good book." And then
Read this
he
thing.
bought that.
And he bought it. So yeah, that's the value of networking.
The funny thing is that when we were trying to break in this, we got told that's such an irregular career, right? It's so tumultuous. How could you be a writer? But our computer programming friends, they've changed jobs like 100 times. And we are just doing the same old thing
Yeah.
20 years later.
That's the gig economy at work, right? Though, one of my favorite little stories to tell at my 20-year high school reunion, we did, those little games where you're like, who's traveled the farthest? Who has the most kids? All these things. They did who has held the most jobs since graduation, and everyone was at like 3 or 4, except for me and my friend who became a filmmaker. So the two artists in the graduating class we both tied at 14 jobs each. 13 or 14, I can't remember exactly. Because artists gotta sweat to not die, not starve to death.
So we will be taking, can they even see me?
Yeah,
They can
you're
kinda see
zoomed
me.
out.
Ooh, there's like a
Oh,
special
it got turned.
pile of books cam.
There's a pile of books cam. For those who don't know what's going on, the reason we actually have these is because I need to sign tons of stuff. And it's really boring to sign tons of stuff when I'm just sitting there. We have finished The Way of Kings leatherbounds. And those are off being printed-ish, we think, for all those who did the Kickstarter. Theoretically, your book is going to come within a few months. We can't say exactly when, but those are off. And so now I need to catch up on the backlog of billions of hardcovers I need to sign. And then I can start doing more leather bounds because we're way behind on those as well. So.
Well, and it's what we were just talking about, right? Artists work.
Yeah.
And so if you're sitting around doing one thing when you could be sitting around doing two things,
Yep. Then
that's what we do.
double using our time is like,
Multitask.
And we're really good at turning things we were already doing into money. That's like a hallmark. Like that's why we're writers, right? Like I'm writing these books. I will turn this into a career. I remember, I've told this story a few times. Do you remember when we went to that Magic the Gathering? You were there, right? It was Mirrodin block.
Yeah, I
when
remember
they
that
did
one.
they back then, for those who don't know, pre-releases for Magic were these huge events, these massive things, like tournaments, and they would run these 64-person mini tournaments. And it was the first one I ever went to, and I won my 64-person one. And immediately the gears started working in my head of, maybe I could go pro.
Maybe we could make this work.
And I had to be like, no.
You're not allowed to do that. I remember going there.
Yeah.
Because I, played something and we finished the match and there was some time, and so I was just chatting with the other guy. This was the Mirrodin pre-release.
Yeah.
And he says, so you just come alone? I'm like, no, I'm here with a couple of friends. It was you and I can't remember who the other one was.
Yeah.
Probably
Nate Goodrich,
Yeah,
probably.
Nate Goodrich. And I said, I'm here with some other friends over there. The really nerdy guy over there. And he's like, this is a Magic tournament. You're going to have to be more specific. And just then your phone rang, and it was the Final Fantasy fight music.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, no, never mind. I know which one it is now.
Yeah. But, like I had to say, Brandon, you've already taken one hobby and made a career out of it, or are trying to. Don't do that again. Not allowed.
Yeah.
But you turned role-playing.
I did.
into a career.
I've monetized role-playing twice.
Yes.
Now, because I do a show on Twitch called Typecast RPG, which now we have 2 campaigns. I don't know if I told you that. Every Tuesday we do D&D, and then every other Wednesday we're playing Star Trek, which is awesome.
Which version of Star Trek are you playing?
Star Trek Adventures. It's the newest one from Modifius. It is, at least for now, my favorite RPG.
Oh, cool.
I really love it. Star Trek is always a very hard one to capture, which is why most of the Star Trek board games or video games are all combat, even though that's not what the show's about.
Right.
And this one actually captures the feel of using science as a group to solve a problem in a way that I didn't think would be possible, but it works really well. And then I also I run games. I'm a professional game master now.
Yeah, you're telling me you have 8 campaigns you
I
run
have
now?
8 campaigns. Let me make sure that I'm counting correctly, because I've got the 2 typecast ones, and then I've got Monday, and then 2 typecast, Monday, and Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday, and then and then a monthly one, and then a bi-weekly one. So it's 8 campaigns that I'm doing. One of which, Thursday night, is your son.
Yes, my son and his cousins.
Yeah.
Dan runs a campaign for them, which they love. It's kind of different because there are various players who are more interested perhaps in having pets than in slaying beasts. And so at the end of the day, at the end of the campaign, they come tell me about what their pets did as much as what they did in the various campaigns.
Oh man, and the pets got their moment to shine last week.
Oh, did they?
It was great. They had to do a jailbreak. They've been spending the whole campaign traveling across the world to try to free the 2 twin princesses.
Their parents.
Free their parents from a
Yes.
dungeon. And they finally got to that dungeon, and there was a dungeon guard. And they're like, okay, we got to take this guy out. pets attack, and they launched. At this point, they had accrued something on the order of like 12 little foxes and ferrets and things, and they just swarmed this guy, and it was wonderful.
Joel has a polar bear.
Joel has a giant polar bear, which
Yep.
is so hard to work around.
He really wanted a polar bear.
Because anytime they go anywhere, we're like, okay, where's your bear? And he says, oh crap, where is the bear gonna be?
Yep.
They're gonna infiltrate a city. Okay, where's the bear gonna be? But it's working well. It's a lot of fun.
Yep. A whole group of first-time role players. And I've done things before where a first-time role player came in. You always get a different perspective on role playing. When somebody who doesn't come in with preconceived notions plays, you always learn something about role playing.
We've got the guy who basically thinks this is Skyrim.
Yep.
Except he plays it with his cousins. We've got the ones who are in it for the pets.
Yep.
And they are not as interested in any of their powers. They don't know what any of their spells do. They're just there for the pets.
Well, Hannah knows she can talk to animals because she tells me about all the animals she talked to at the end of every campaign.
And I look for reasons to, excuses for her to talk to an animal. Because that's what you got to do. I was telling Brandon upstairs earlier that one of my favorite descriptions of being a game master is that you are a group therapist for all of your friends and their neuroses, except you have to do it making a funny voice and pretending you're a goblin. And that is such a wonderfully accurate version. And being a professional game master, where a lot of the groups that I work with, probably half of those 8 campaigns are just random collections of people off the internet that I help work together, that I assembled them into a group.
So like somebody, you didn't tell me about this. So we came to you and said, I'm going to provide 5 players and pay for all of them, and they're going to have a campaign together. You get a lot of just like individuals like, I really just need a group and I don't know anyone.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, it's kind of split half and half. So like, for example, when I was on your stream a few months ago, I don't remember when it was like October or something, somebody saw it and heard me talking about this and contacted me the next day and said, hey, I saw you on Brandon's thing. My friend group would love if you ran Curse of Strahd for us. And I'm actually missing that game right now. It's actually not, I think, for another hour or two. But hey, guys, you're awesome. And we've actually become, friends, and we hang out all the time, and it's been great. And then I've got other people. So right now, for example, I am trying to find extra players for a Pendragon campaign, which is another one of my favorite RPGs, and
I assume it's Arthurian.
It's
then?
all King Arthur, and it's really neat because it's generational. So like, the Great Pendragon campaign is 80 years long, and so you will eventually die, and then you'll play as your son, and then maybe even as your grandson, something like that. And I've got 2 players interested in that right now, and I'm actively looking for more to fill out the group. So, if you're out there, let's play.
How do they do that if they want to?
If they do that, the best way to find me is the Dan Wells. That is my website. That is my Twitter. That's my email address as well. Dan@thedanwells.com. And so look up the website if you can't remember me, or just email me directly and say, hey, I'm interested in setting this up, and we will set this up. I've got slots for 2 more games I can run. I am looking for people to fill out 2 of these other games. One is Pendragon, and then I've got a Dresden Files group right now that we might be changing what game that is, because that campaign's about to end. But anyway, I've got lots of slots and would love to play a role-playing game with you.
And we're going to take questions. Most of this preamble is, but Dan and I just like to talk about random crap. But also, if you want to know, good things to ask us now about how we started, because we kind of started together, or forming that first writing group, kind of our careers. Dan's done a lot of audio originals. If you're interested in the audiobook world, He's got posters up for some of his audio originals.
Actually, let me talk about those really quick before we start Q&A, because I have a brand new book that comes out tomorrow. It is in this series, Zero G. You can see there's Zero G, and then the sequel right there is Dragon Planet. Book 3 is called Stargazer. It comes out tomorrow. And it is on the Audible...
It's like Audible
Unlimited
Originals,
or Audible something.
yeah.
Audible Plus.
It's like the Audible Plus. It's
do you
the
get,
Netflix model, basically.
Do you get these things free with, like, they've had, like, so many different programs. Like, for a while, when you bought your credit, you got 2 free credits for other things, right?
Yeah.
And then
That's
they might
how
have
this one was.
That's how that one was.
But Stargazer tomorrow is literally just a Netflix model. Where if you have an Audible account,
you can
read it for free.
Okay.
And so it's about,
Can you
know,
get
6
the
hours
first one?
long, full cast audio. I don't know if 1 and 2 are available on the same service, but
How
they're
standalone is it?
the third one.
Yeah.
It's relatively good. They're middle grade. The main character's 12 years old, and so they all stand on their own pretty well. I try not to write down to an audience, but at the same time, I'm not going to rely on the 7-year-old to remember exactly what happened in the last book that came out.
Middle grade's a very different beast, even from YA. It's a bigger jump, is what I found.
Yeah.
Middle grade was harder. Like, my middle grades, I wrote 6 of them, or 5 and 1 coming out, and I don't think I ever hit, like, the right middle grade, right? Like,
it can be a really tricky voice to find. This third one, definitely edges older.
Yeah.
Because it's the third one in the series. I wanted to get a little more complicated with it. The 7-year-olds that email me all the time are still gonna love it. But
so you can ask us questions about anything you want to, but audio originals, being a professional GM, running, Dan does the whole live role-playing sessions on Twitch thing.
Yeah.
Or, just random
Brandon was
goofballs
gonna
breaking
play on Twitch with us, but then he's too busy.
Do you know that I've done that one time, a live role-playing session. It was one of the worst experiences in my life because I am a storyteller and I like my stories to be perfect. That's why I spend all this time. And I am not an improvisational person.
Yeah.
And so knowing people were watching me tell a story, expecting my story to be good because I'm Brandon Sanderson.
That would be
and knowing
nerve-wracking.
that I was doing a bad job of it because I don't do improv was just completely, it was just miserable.
In what context did you do it?
It was at Gen Con. It was live on stage.
Okay.
And it was running the Mistborn. I was a player in the Mistborn campaign.
Ooh.
So it was even more stress. And so, so that's why I've dodged it, is because
no, that makes perfect sense.
I am not an improv guy. You are. You're really good at improv. Well,
thank you. It's a totally different thing. Collaborative storytelling as opposed to, the kind of hardcore God of the world outlining storytelling that you do is night and day different.
Yep. And I enjoy role-playing, but the reason I stopped role-playing, I've told you this before, right? Because I haven't role-played in like 10 years, is it started to feel a lot like my job. And so I would spend all day doing my job, and then I would have to, at night, go do my job, and then come back and do my job again, because I do work in 2 sessions. And I just started to dread going to role-playing because of that. It got better when I stopped GMing, right? When I was just playing. That last campaign, you were in that last campaign I did when I was dating Emily, right? I was playing the really old guy.
Oh, the Eberron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the last one I did. I mean, we did a 4th edition, but I was only there 1 week or something.
Well, the 4th edition didn't last long.
Yeah.
We did, Eberron is a D&D setting that came out years and years ago.
Yeah, it was for the Wizard of the Coast contest for worlds.
Yeah, they did a world building contest that all of us
I remember I
submitted
submitted
to.
one.
But the one that won was Eberron by Keith Baker, and it was brilliant. It was really cool, kind of 1920s rather than medieval.
Yeah.
And Brandon's character, the elves of this world like worship death, and so they have liches who are good guys and things like that. And so Brandon wanted to be like a 700-year-old elf, and he never walked once. We played this campaign for 2 years, and he spent the whole time on this little palanquin that skeletons hauled around because he was an ancient necromancer. It was great.
Yep. I was too old to walk.
Yeah.
I took all the the disadvantage things. The D&D, they had a rule. It's like if you're above this percentage age, you get -4 to all of your physical stats.
Yeah.
Above this, you're like -5. So we had like a 3 strength.
But
and
some pretty impressive intelligence
yes.
bonuses.
Well, it is a little min-maxing, but they only give you like +1 intelligence and -4 strength or something like that to try and balance it. His whole goal was to die gloriously and get embalmed and turned into like a lich, which was a good thing in his society. They had good liches. So he was out there to try to, he'd spend his whole life as like a paper pusher, essentially, in a wizard school. He's like, I'm going to go out and be an adventurer and make a name for myself at age 700 so that they have to embalm me. So, but yeah, that was all of our campaigns were really fun. I really liked that one.
Was that the last one we did?
That's the last one.
Big House was the last one we did.
No, because Big House was me. I ran Big House.
Yeah.
So Big House was before that. It was before I stopped DMing.
Huh. Well, there you go.
Sorry, I warned you we blab about things. Did we have a question?
One I saw in the chat. I don't know who said it. They want to know how you guys became friends.
How we became friends. We kind of told that story already. We were in the same creative writing group.
Yeah.
Same creative writing class that Dave Wolverton taught, and formed a writing group that was the two of us and our friend Ben, who's a computer programmer, and our friend Nate Goodrich, who's also a computer programmer, right?
Peter.
Oh, and Peter was in it too.
Peter was in it.
Because Peter did not want to be a writer; he wanted to be an editor.
I always forget that Goodrich was in that, but he totally was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had nicknames for each other.
Yep.
And
I was Mr. Prolific.
You were Mr. Prolific. Nate was the Eternal Rewrite.
Yep.
I was the Egregious Colon.
It's my favorite of them all.
And I'm not going to explain why. Was it illness or was it punctuation? Or was it both?
But as Dan said, Dave was like, did he actually say that? Who's really serious?
I think he did. I remember at some point,
right.
Kind of the whole raising hand idea, because I kind of go out of my way to do that now if I'm on a panel.
Right.
Is, if people are looking for a writing group or something, raise your hands or stand up, find each other in the hall afterwards. But it might have just been that we saw each other in the class, and then the next time we were at Leading Edge,
I
we're like,
vaguely
hey,
remember
let's just get together.
You reading something out loud in class and me thinking it was really good. I'm being like, I need to get in a writing group.
Early in my career, that sounds suspiciously like a false memory.
Hey, that Tivneri book was good.
It was
for
better than
brand
it
new
should
writers.
have been.
I remember
true.
that book very distinctly. I can't remember what Nate Goodrich's book was. I love him. I read the same chapter.
Very
15 times.
anime. Very anime.
But I remember basically the whole Tivneri story. Now, some of the coolest visuals and things I later found out were
that book was thinly veiled Warhammer fan fiction.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, this magic system's really cool, and you're eventually like, yeah, it's
my version of it is pretty different from Chaos in Warhammer, because I wanted to be a little more crazy about it.
Right?
But
and
anyway,
we mentioned before that Jasna being a historian is partially a homage to how much I thought Tivneri, his elf historian,
he was an elf historian,
was a really great character.
Basically saw the writing on the wall. He'd studied enough history to know that times they were a-changin', and he needed to do something about it, which is very Jasna. Mm-hmm. Which is probably why Jasna's my favorite character in that series. So we, started this writing group, and we, wrote together forever, and then we started going to conventions together.
Because of Dave, specifically.
He said, if you're serious about this, form a writing group and then start networking. And so we would save all our money and go to, like, World Fantasy and things like that, sharing hotel rooms, packing 4 of us in. I've slept in Brandon's bed more often than most people can say. I assume. But I used to say more than anyone except your wife, but I bet your kids sleep in your bed now and then.
Yeah, they do. So, yeah. I have a question for you, Dan.
Okay.
I don't, I tell this story in my class now, but when I tell it to my class, I warn them, I say, I'm uncertain of the con networking thing as a way of breaking in anymore. I just don't know if it's, it worked really well for us. And a lot of people during our age, during our era. Jay Lake got well known by going to the conventions. A lot of us just kind of were networking that way and found our way in. I remember Naomi Novik being there at the conventions and Scalzi being there just right during that same time when we were all breaking in.
Grossman.
But I don't know if it's still the way.
I don't know. Because a lot of the ones like World Fantasy that used to be the prime networking con, I think just kind of got overfished, so to speak. And now agents are, at least in my experience, they seem to be a lot more leery there of getting rushed by aspiring writers.
Well, and the internet's more of a thing. You can follow an agent on Facebook now, and we didn't have that back then. There was no Facebook. And so...
when we broke in, it was still print out your manuscript, tie it with twine, and mail it,
via Owl.
Pony Express.
Yeah.
And today, they've got, manuscript. I don't even know what the hashtag is on Twitter, where people will pitch manuscripts to agents and things like that. I don't know how to break in today.
I just wonder, if the conventions... Plus, the conventions are... They seem to be a different beast. I've had some, there's been some Me Too stuff involved with some of the conventions that I was unaware of when I was attending. Things you don't see when you are a 6-foot-tall dude who is very gregarious. That there's a different side of the convention culture that... shall we say, I've come to understand, doesn't treat other people the same way it maybe treated me.
Well, and, the way that we broke in as, white guys who can be very extroverted when called upon to do so is not feasible for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so... go to a convention and hit up an agent is not something I even tell people anymore because it's just not a possibility for a lot of writers out there.
I've had some students who went and tried doing that and ended up spending the whole night getting hit on, right? Right, which never happened to me. But of course, those parties at those conventions, that's what a lot of people are there for.
Yeah.
And the younger generation, our generation, considered them networking opportunities. The older generation, they were hookup spots. And that just went way over my head. Right? I kind of knew it was happening.
Look at us.
Yes.
No one's hitting on us at conventions.
But there's been a real problem as the generation after ours is look, this is business. Why is this older generation here acting like this? And
I mean, first time I went to Dragon Con, whatever tour representative that I was there with sat me down first day. We got to the hotel and she's like, everyone here is here to hook up. You need to be careful and watch yourself.
Dragon Con's a different beast.
Dragon Con is very different than everything else because it is very much the
right. Everyone knows
party.
that Dragon Con's a party, but you wouldn't expect that at World Fantasy, which was taught to me as the professional networking convention. That's the purpose of it. But maybe not everyone has the same view on those things, and hopefully the industry is changing because there are definitely places for hookups. I'm not saying there's not, but there was a lot of mixed.
Yeah. Consensual hookups where both parties have the same amount of power in the situation.
Yes, are just fine.
One thing that I do know has at least a couple of people who have had success with are the very formalized pitch sessions that agents do at cons.
I've heard good things about those
And
too.
that, I don't remember that existing when we were breaking in, and I think that might have been a reaction to kind of our generation moving in and treating this as a laser-focused business opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think the agents were just like, okay, let's codify this.
So that people aren't getting me in the elevator and
Yeah.
pitching. They can actually just come to a pitch session. Yeah.
So-
Sorry. They didn't even ask how to break in. They just asked how we met each other. But, you know.
I just did see an interesting question that it would be
Okay.
fun to listen to you guys talk about. Again, I don't know, I lost the name of the chat, but they want you guys to rank the Star Wars movies from worst to best.
Oh,
worst
worst to
to
best.
This
Worst.
is going to be controversial regardless of how we do it.
No, because 5, no one would put anything below 5, would
Oh,
they?
absolutely. There are people
Okay.
who are angry.
I suppose there are
And-
people that dislike
and
the,
would put
the new
Last
JJ
Jedi
ones. No,
and-
the Star Wars. You said Star Wars, and I said
Yeah,
Star
you
Trek.
said Star Wars.
I thought Star Trek because you were doing the Star
Well,
Trek.
JJ.
Oh,
Still.
yeah.
Sorry. Star Wars.
I can rank the
Yeah.
Star Trek ones a little more
Yeah,
easily.
let's rank Star Trek ones. We're going to ignore your question, and we can maybe do them both. But you've been talking about that.
Low,
5.
You're
It's
right.
got to be 5.
5.
Right.
Star
Gotta
Trek
be
Final
5.
Frontier is the worst one.
Yeah.
After that, well, actually, Nemesis might be worse.
Nemesis is
I have
pretty
watched.
bad.
I've watched Final Frontier all the way through, and I can't say that about Nemesis. I've had to
Final
stop.
Frontier is like Uhura doing a sexy dance to distract the aliens is just so cringeworthy.
It is.
It's
and you're
Shatner
right.
directing, Shatner in a
See,
Shatner written.
But at the same time,
Yeah.
I can't remember what I was watching. It was a Star Trek spoof of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Where somebody started doing the fan dance, and they're like, "That's stupid. What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, it worked in Star Trek V." And they said, "Nothing worked in Star Trek V," which is a great joke. Okay, but Nemesis is also
Nemesis,
terrible.
those are the two
Let's
lowest.
put those
I
at
will
the bottom.
definitely agree those are the two
After
lowest.
which, it is probably going to be Insurrection.
Well, where are you ranking the
Oh, yeah.
second JJ version?
Star Trek Into Darkness.
Into
is
Darkness.
genuinely bad.
Yeah. I love JJ. That movie just didn't work.
Yeah. On the other hand, the third JJ one, Star Trek Beyond, that's top 5 for me.
That one was fantastic. Though
Yeah.
I do think that was... Didn't that get written by, what's his name, Scotty, who's in the Edgar Wright movies, Simon Pegg? Didn't Simon Pegg write that one?
I know he was a writer on it. I don't know if he was the screenwriter.
Right. That one's really good.
that one-
I
that's one
like
of the
the
best
first
ones.
JJ one a ton.
That was good too.
I like that it says, we're doing our own thing. Here's an alternate universe. And then the
Yeah.
casting on that is just fantastic.
Okay, so let's
Yeah.
say Final Frontier, Nemesis, Into Darkness,
Right.
and then Insurrection,
Okay.
and then I'm probably gonna say Search for Spock.
So here's the thing. If you
Well,
watched
I keep
Motion
forgetting
Picture
Motion
lately,
Picture.
have you watched it?
It has been a long time.
I am fond of it. It is so boring. Mm-hmm. It is so, we want to be 2001. Let's spend 5 minutes swooping while music plays through the docks. It is
Yes.
not that great.
It is really boring. It feels more like a movie to me than
Yeah.
Search for Spock, which feels just like a long episode with kind of low production
I
value.
mean, Search for Spock is not great.
On the other
right?
hand, Search for Spock and Christopher Lloyd, my good buddy, did establish the look and the personality that has defined Klingons ever since.
Yeah.
So we got to give it credit for that. It
So-
did ruin Kirk forever, though.
So those two are kind of
Okay.
in our.
I'll put
those are the
those-
top of the worst. Those
Okay.
two.
Yeah,
right?
and then after those,
then you get
everything
to the
gets
middle.
good.
Yeah.
Everything's good.
Right.
I might put the first JJ one next.
Okay.
And then
I haven't seen 6 in a while, but it's
Voyage
good.
Home. I love 6.
6 is better than Voyage Home, but Voyage Home is just so much fun, right? Like 6 is a better Star Trek movie.
Yeah.
And so I would put it above Voyage Home, but Voyage Home's the first one I saw in the theaters.
Yeah.
I just loved it as a kid.
It's really wonderful. I think I probably,
It's got-
unless I'm forgetting one.
It's
I'm
got
gonna
the
say
LDS joke that is so good. Too much LDS.
yeah,
and
too much LDS back in the 60s.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna say Voyage Home,
Uh-huh.
and then I'm gonna say First Contact.
Okay. See, I'm going to be controversial. First Contact's my favorite. Generations has got to be down at the bottom.
Yeah,
of
I
the-
forgot about
Yeah.
Generations altogether. That one's down. That's
that
below
one's-
Search for Spock, probably.
But like, I love First Contact.
First
And
Contact is great.
a lot of people don't like it because it is too much Picard as action hero. But like his emotion, he's such a good actor that he acts that.
really good one.
Yeah. So that's my favorite Star Trek. It's
See,
gonna be that one.
but I'm already at the point where we're talking about the upper echelon. Where
Right.
We've got, I'm probably gonna say First Contact, and then Star Trek Beyond, and then Undiscovered Country, which is my favorite, and then the very best one of all, which is Galaxy Quest.
You had to put that zinger in there. Galaxy Quest is really good.
Mom.
Do we dare rank Star Wars, or is this going to just be too controversial?
The thing is, I don't hate the J.J. Abrams ones as much as the internet wants me to.
Right.
Like Rise of Skywalker, for example, is a narrative disaster, but it is a genuinely fun movie with some absolutely incredible moments in it. And so the worst one for me, ironically, is actually still going to be number 5, Attack of the Clones. After which,
So I would probably put Attack of the Clones worst as well.
yeah, I think it's funny that it's number 5 in both cases.
Yeah.
Man, what's next? Ranking them from worst to best is
Yeah.
so much harder than best to worst.
Right.
Whoever asked this question is mean.
So here's a controversial take. Since it's hard to rate best to worst versus like my favorite is Return of the Jedi. Even though I acknowledge structurally it's weaker than the previous two. I would say that if you're just looking at filmmaking, I actually would rank Star Wars above Empire. I think the screenplay is so tight, you can learn so much from it. And then very close beneath it, Empire, showing how to do a really great sequel that has an amazing twist, but is better than its twist even, right? Which is hard to do in one of those. But my favorite, the confrontation of Vader and Luke is so good.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that whole final sequence where there's 3 battles going on in 3 different arenas at 3 different scales, and yet they're intercut flawlessly.
and
like-
just the character stuff, right? Like, what I want from Star Wars is epic storytelling. And that movie does it, right? It fulfills long-standing character arcs that have been just going for 2 movies, and it pays them off so well that I just love the movie.
Yeah. Well, and you and I are the right age for it, right?
Yep.
I mean, you were probably, 7 or 8 years old when
So I
Jedi came
saw
out?
Empire in the theater, but can't remember it. I was too young. My dad said I just ran out of the theater and hid every time Darth Vader came on the screen. But I remember Return of the Jedi. So, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I was an adult. I was probably 26 or 27 years old before I knew that people didn't like Return of the Jedi. Like, that was a whole new concept to me because I grew up with it and I've seen
Right.
it 4,000 times, and I think it's wonderful.
I am today years old. That people to find out that people
That
dislike
people
that
didn't
show.
like Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. For years, it was the black sheep of the Star Wars world, and then the prequels were made.
You know, the JJ movies have made me reevaluate the prequels
A lot of people.
because they're still an indulgent mess, but they do things really well that the sequel movies failed, and the sequel movies did things really well that the prequels failed at.
Yep.
And it's been interesting to watch different artists come in and try to do different things.
So here's my other hot take.
Okay.
That's controversial.
Okay.
I did not like Rogue One at all. I had
Really?
everyone talks
Oh
about it.
no,
being
I remember we've
the
had
best.
this conversation.
And I had a miserable experience at it. And this has to do with the things I like in movies versus the things other people like. I can acknowledge that it has the best sequence of the new movies, probably in the last 20, 30 minutes, right? But there are some things like, first off, I did not want a dark, gritty reboot of Star Wars, right? Like, Star Wars doesn't have to be dark and gritty. There can be one thing that is just about, an arc about redeeming
Heroes doing cool adventures.
Yes. And redeeming, your father from darkness and bringing, that's Star Wars. And I know that to a lot of people, that's not what Star Wars has to be. And I totally understand that. But opening your movie with a rebel agent cold-bloodedly murdering somebody that was sympathetic, just left a sour taste on my mouth, and it just got worse.
Well, it is. I like it more than you do, but it definitely has a lot of issues. The two characters that I loved were the ones, and I can't remember anyone's name in the entire movie, and so I just refer to these as the gay space uncles because that's what Dongwon calls them.
Right.
Donnie Yen was completely wasted. He was delightful, but also he was totally wasted. And there are parts of the movie where he has incredible force-sensitive powers, and then there are other parts of the movie where he is a doddering old blind man who can't do anything. And
so I've told you my
no
rewrite,
consistency.
right? My rewrite to Rogue One. The number one thing I would change if I could have that script in front of me is that not Donnie Yen, but the other guy, I would have him live. So what I would do is I'd rewrite their arc so that they were both Jedi Temple people, and one has lost his faith and the other maintains it, right? And Donnie Yen's always talking about the Force. And then I would have them be need to get that thing to happen or whatnot. And Donnie Yen use the Force to move the lever, right? Or when he walks across the thing, actively, this is the Force. And his friend getting his faith back and being I am a Jedi Temple, the Force is real. We are fighting for something real. My friend has died, but it gave me, and then he should have carried the plans out rather than beaming them, because beaming them opens so many cans of worms in the Star Wars world. If he physically, one of them lived, this is something I think that they missed in the Dirty Dozen style narrative, is that, and it's okay because they get the information out, but having one person live among the people who are all going to, by the way, spoilers.
Spoilers for this several years old,
Yeah.
incredibly popular movie.
Having one person live from among the team of people who are doomed to die to kind of carry on their for them to represent, I think that's a really important part of that type of narrative. And if he just got out with it and
it would have provided more than one character arc, right?
Yeah.
Because as it is, the story basically has one character arc, which is I get to the point where I'm willing to sacrifice myself.
Yeah.
And that's all any of them do. My controversial dislike is I genuinely hate the Solo movie.
Haven't seen it, so.
You are not missing anything. And this is another controversial one because a lot of people really love it. Donald Glover is fantastic in it. And honestly, the guy does a pretty good Han Solo, but the story is so boring. It is so boring. If you can, I was literally falling asleep during one of the action scenes, which is not a good sign for your action scenes.
I've heard that that the whole robot subplot is really, really troubling because if you're going to open the can of worms of are all of these droids enslaved, you have a huge thing you need to address in Star Wars.
See, I don't even remember a droid subplot. That's how bad this movie was.
But I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to it. But there you go. There's some hot takes.
Yeah. See,
I
on
feel
the
like
other hand, hot take wise, I actually think that Last Jedi is pretty good. It's not amazingly good, but it has. the thing is that Last Jedi for me is the one that very clearly showed something new. And I hadn't really felt like I'd seen something new in Star Wars since Return of the Jedi.
I am one of those people who did not like that movie very much. Now,
I mean,
that's...
I can understand that because
Yeah.
it has a lot of problems.
I mean, his next film, Knives Out, is so good.
Mm-hmm.
So
His
incredibly
previous
good.
ones. Have you ever seen Brick?
I haven't.
Brick is fantastic.
But I have the same problems everybody had with Last Jedi, right? Like, the slow speed space chase is so terrible. It's like mind-numbingly bad to me that every time anything was referenced to it, I was just like, this is so bad. Like, warp ahead of them. What? What are you doing? This is so dumb. And then having Poe's character arc be, you, rebel, whose entire existence is about fighting authoritarian people, authority that does not explain itself and things, must have a character arc to learn to follow authority from a figure who's not going to explain why and is reckless with people's lives. Like, that's the character arc for your movie about a space rebel? It was so painful to me to watch that.
Yes. And I'm not going to argue that any of those things are good. One of the worst things about that movie for me is that it made painfully obvious that it did not have in mind a solid character hook for Poe or Finn.
Yeah.
The movie
wasted
brought
Finn.
them out
I
and then
love
had no
Finn.
idea what to do with either of them. They were just kind of there.
I loved his character in
He was so
in
good
7.
in whatever that one's called, Force
and
Awakens.
People talk about the Canto Bite sequence, which I've talked about in my class before. I don't have as big a problem as others do with this, because I could see this sequence working, but it's a problem of payoffs and promises. We haven't had established to us that Finn's character arc or motivation has anything to do with this. His character arc and motivation, as reinforced to us at the beginning, is he needs to find his friend, Rey, and help her. And so we go on this wacky space adventure that doesn't feel like it relates to that at all, and it's hard to get invested.
Yes.
But yeah, the movie's just a disaster. I haven't even mentioned that my least favorite part is Luke Skywalker in it. It just...
See, he worked for me.
It's totally
that whole
fine.
thing worked. The idea that he has lost his faith and he has become bitter and old, like, I'm in the camp that did not want to see any of the original cast back in the first place, because this universe is too big to just endlessly retell the Skywalker saga over and over and over. So
I think that's a waste with Luke. I could totally buy that with Leia and Han. Let them ride off into the sunset. Don't have to show us this, but this is the Jedi Master who's running the new, Luke Skywalker was my hero growing up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, this makes sense. You have Obi-Wan, and he did it, and now Luke, and that's the whole point of the original movies, is that's the wrong thing, and Luke knew that. His whole character was about showing faith in his father when everyone else gave up on him. That's the fundamental character.
Yes.
And if you want to have him be old and bitter, I'm going to dislike it, but I think you need to lean into it being a movie about him. Because in this, I saw no reason why he got his faith back. I saw no reason, I saw no character arc for him. It's like they wanted to have the Obi-Wan, or even better, one of the best, like the old grizzled veteran who comes back into service. They wanted, Blazing Saddles does such a great version of that.
Yeah.
Right? They wanted that, but they had too many other things going on in the movie to actually do that story. So,
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. I really disliked it.
They didn't give the full arc that they needed. But what they did do, we're basically teaching a storytelling class about Star Wars. They do have the moment with Yoda showing up and burning the records, and they have the absolutely wonderful line, which is, they are moving beyond us. That is the fate of all masters. That's my favorite part of the entire movie.
And if she had taken his hand, Ben Solo's hand at the end, and they had done something different, it almost would have redeemed the movie. If that theme had been strong enough that he's like, let's burn it all down and make our own thing, and she said yes, I would have been excited for the third movie.
Well, the thing is, I think that's where it was headed, but everyone hated Last Jedi so much that they jettisoned the whole thing for free.
Like, yeah.
Which is why the third movie starts with like a 20-minute previously on sequence about stuff that didn't actually happen.
Yeah, but...
Makes me wonder if they're ever going to release JJ's cut, since that's maybe going to become more popular.
The last thing the internet needs is more angry fanboys ranting about Last Jedi, so maybe we should move on from this topic.
I know, we probably already both lost hundreds of fans.
Yeah, so they're like, we've heard this, guys.
Yeah, I'm going to lose a few more fans. Rose got the shaft. She was a
totally
wonderful
did.
character.
She was a good character.
She was a good character, and people hated her so much that they cut her out of the franchise entirely, which was dumb, and if you were part of that, you should feel bad. Anyway, I'm done ranting about Star Wars now.
Well, let's move on to another major franchise. People are wondering your thoughts on WandaVision.
WandaVision?
Brilliant. Thumbs up.
Absolutely brilliant. I was initially a little worried in the first 2 episodes because they were relying so heavily on pastiche of old shows that I grew up watching. Mm-hmm. But like my kids bounced off of them completely because they've never seen the Dick Van Dyke Show or Bewitched or Donna Reed or any of these things. And so they had none of the cultural resonance that they needed to get into it.
Let's avoid spoilers on this one, though.
Yeah.
Because it's active, so.
Yeah, so I'm not going to spoil anything, but I will say that using the sitcom idea as not just a structural device, but also an emotional metaphor for what's going on, it's incredible. I'm really impressed. It's not a mind trip on the level of Legion, but it's not trying to be.
It is just experimental enough
Yeah.
to feel really new and interesting. But then you have other elements that we will mention that come into episode 3 or 4 that really ground it in what we love and expect from the MCU by highlighting some characters who have always deserved more screen time, and now we get to have them have more screen time, and they are delightful and really fun.
I love the idea that Paul Bettany at some point was like, hey, I can make a couple of bucks by spending an afternoon in an audio booth and pretending to be Tony Stark's computer. And now, 10 years later, he's dressing up in black and white and doing a pastiche of, Bewitched.
Yep.
And that is a delightful chain of events.
So, absolutely loving it.
I wish we could talk more about it, but you're right, we should not spoil anything. I will say this, since we are talking story structure so heavily. If you out there in viewer land watched WandaVision and then got to the end of episode 6 and felt kind of deflated or unsatisfied by it, it's because the story structure, it didn't have a solid arc. Every other episode is very tightly constrained by kind of sitcom structure, and that one didn't do that. And so even though a lot of big exciting things happened, it did kind of feel a little like the weakest episode, and that's why, because the story wasn't there.
I disagree with you slightly on this. I agree that the structure is not quite there. I disagree that it's the weakest episode.
Really?
Yep. But I view it as an Act 1, of which the next 2 episodes will be Act 2 and Act 3.
Yeah, which is what I'm assuming is going to happen.
And so for me, it's getting into the stuff I love, so I like it more because I like continuing stories, character arcs, storytelling across multiple, and this sort of stuff. And this is the one that's finally giving me the payoff for those early episodes, which were wonderful, but also, like you said, like a joke, a funny joke with a little bit of story added in.
Yeah, 1 and 2 particularly are like that.
And what I get for those it is episodes like this where now that's becoming a slice of a large story, which I prefer.
Yeah, and I can see that, and I agree in a lot of ways. But
I could be wrong if it doesn't pay off, if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might be that that's what they're doing. I think the one big problem that I have with the modern age of binge television and on-demand TV is so many people have forgotten how to pace an episode of television. And I think storytelling is suffering for it.
See, here's the thing. This is where we're going to disagree. I hate television storytelling and pacing. Just hate it. I don't watch television very often and haven't for years because I just actively dislike how it's paced because it relies too much on repetition and on resetting.
A lot of shows do, yeah.
Yep. And even good shows, I'll be saying, you learned this 3 episodes ago. Why are we learning this again?
Doing this again.
Why?
No, and you're absolutely right. And, the ability now to have stakes linger and grow over time and, people can learn things and characters and status quos are able to change more rapidly. I am down for all of that. Mm-hmm. I just feel like a lot of the time the stories fall apart, and WandaVision hadn't done that until 6 for me.
Yeah, I did. I don't know if it was my favorite episode, but it was at least number 2 for me.
Cool. Well, there you go.
Because of the ways, this is why I write 1,000-page epic fantasies, right? This is just a kind of a taste difference. Mm-hmm. I will have a video essay coming up on The Good Place in the near future, which I really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And the essay isn't about this, but the TV-ness of it bugged me so much that it was hard sometimes to enjoy the movie or the show.
That's interesting because that one, is constantly reframing itself.
It's constantly reframing itself and then telling the same story again. Right?
That's true, yeah.
And they let me have plausible deniability or suspension of disbelief by saying there are in-world reasons we're telling you the exact same story again with subtle differences. And I was able to go along for the ride. And I really ended up liking The Good Place quite a bit. I think it's a fantastic show.
Awesome.
But my biases in storytelling, it butted up against in the ways that television does and didn't ruin the experience for me, and I ended up really liking it. But man, I noticed them more than ever because it was a really good show that was bugging me.
That was still tripping over the same wires.
Yep. And I realized I've come to really like the Netflix model of this is an 8-hour movie. This is not a show with episodes. This is long-form storytelling.
And there's a lot to like about that. I hate getting to the end of an episode and realizing that it wasn't about anything. But that's just differences.
It totally was, but we can't talk about that without...
we can't talk about that.
Yep. So let's move on to something else before we accidentally spoil the best show on television right now.
Do you guys want to rank the Marvel movies?
No, there's billions of them.
No, there's too many.
Okay.
I'll give my favorite 5.
Okay.
My favorite 5, all right? Infinity War is number 1.
You liked Infinity War over Endgame?
I did.
You're a crazy person.
No. The reason being that Infinity War did something so hard. I really like Endgame, right?
Okay.
But Infinity War, framing your protagonist as your villain is so hard to write, and I thought they did just a really good job of it.
I disagree with you.
So
he's clearly taking the role of the protagonist when you look at how the narrative beats are lined up, but he is such a phenomenally boring character.
I really liked him.
He is
number 1 for me. Number 2 is The Avengers.
Okay.
And number 3 is Endgame. Very close to each other. Number 4, hot take, is Doctor Strange.
That's a good one.
Epic fantasy and Marvel with a really good lead actor is my jam. And then it's probably the second Captain America.
Civil War.
Not Civil War.
Winter Soldier.
Because the pacing and storytelling in that is just so good.
Really, really good.
Yeah.
All 3 of the Captain Americas kind of fall apart in Act 3 for me, but I would still put Winter Soldier as a top 5. I'm going to put Endgame as the top number one.
Okay.
Because
Payoffs on long.
what they paid off
Yep.
and how they paid it off was brilliant. Thor Ragnarok. At
Oh yeah,
2.
that's probably number 5 for me.
Okay.
Well, number 6. It'd be right after, but it was good. Yeah.
Okay. Boy, then maybe Winter Soldier. The thing is, I loved all 3 Captain Americas, but I also have
I feel
problems
like
with-
only number 1 really fell apart in the third act, right? Like, I didn't think the second one fell apart at all. I can see the argument on.
My problem with 2 is that it asked all these really fascinating questions about security and freedom,
yeah.
and then it didn't have good answers to any of them.
That's legit. I can see that.
You know, and I had the same issue with 3 as well, with Civil War, because it was saying, like, well, here are 2 opposing ideologies, and then rather than answer that question, we're just going to punch each other for 15 minutes. But
I thought it was really smart at the end
yeah,
to frame the ending as not a punch out between mysterious villains, and it turns out that it was like this clash between Tony Stark and Captain America right at the end, right out of the comics. Actually, I like their framing on that, using the same visuals of the comics, kind of, and things like that. Really landed for me. The final little battle.
what eventually made Civil War really work for me, and maybe this was super obvious to everyone else, but for me it took a lot of refrigerator logic to kind of figure out what I thought and what I felt about the movie, is it got to the end and what it was saying essentially is, yes, Captain America's way is better, but only if everyone is Captain America.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
And he eventually realized not everyone is honorable enough to live in this fully anarchist society. And so we do need more rules than I am prepared to be comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so I liked that. I don't know. I'm not giving you a top 5. I don't have a really good one. All his are fine, but Endgame's better than Infinity War. Infinity War's not even a top 10 for me.
I love
It was
Infinity
all
War.
set up, and Thanos is boring as hell. So
Thanos is no Loki, but I really liked him. To interpret that character as well as they did, without the goofy love stuff and the Thanos copter, was really great. I was in awe of how well it was able to do that. But Endgame is that whole Return of the Jedi, here's your payoff, and it has the single best moment in the entire MCU with the portals and things. So there is that. It also introduces time travel.
one of the worst versions of time travel I have ever seen, but one that enabled them to tell a really good story that I loved.
And that the jury's out on whether or not they can, like, time travel is such a can of worms that I just really wanted in that movie. Even a line saying something about why they couldn't do this more, right? And I hope
suspect
that
Loki is gonna pay all
the
that.
shattering the multiverse and things like that could do it. You know, yeah, the time travel anytime you introduce time travel, it's danger. But the story they told with it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Being able to send, the two characters who were getting their send-off in these movies back to revisit their arcs with other characters and reestablishing those and giving them kind of ways to tie them up with neat little bows was really good.
Yeah.
So.
Now, what was I going to say about Endgame? Oh, yeah. So I remember several months ago, like in the middle of the pandemic, somebody was like, I miss movie theaters. Watching a movie communally is so cool.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite theater experiences? And it is hard for me to think of a better one than Endgame.
Yeah.
Because
You can watch the videos on the internet.
everyone is just
yeah.
cheering and shouting. There's at least 3 separate stand up and clap moments in the final battle where the entire theater was on their feet yelling at screen. And that happens so rarely
Yep.
that I just love it.
Yeah. So you make a good argument for Endgame. For the same reason that Jedi is the best, you make a good argument for Endgame. So it's possible I'll shift because for a long time, The Avengers was my favorite, right? I like good payoffs, and I like the structure of that, and I like Loki being the best Marvel villain, being your villain.
Yeah.
But he's not fantastic in The Avengers, right? He just doesn't have enough screen time to be fantastic. He's good when he's there. There's just not a lot of Loki. Rewatching, I'm like, man, I remember there being more Loki.
Yeah, Loki, he is the best Marvel villain, and I think, honestly, one of the very best Marvel characters overall. Which is why Thor Ragnarok is endlessly rewatchable for me. I've seen
really
that
good.
more often than I've seen any other MCU movie.
The whole snake story and stuff is so much fun. So here's my bold prediction. I'm going to be wrong because but I think that Black Widow should happen in Loki's universe, the one where he's taken over.
The Loki TV show, we're going to see Black Widow come back.
No, I think that the Black Widow movie was written to take place in that alternate universe to introduce the idea of alternate universe characters and things. And during that one, 'cause it's such an odd thing to go back and do a movie about her that's a prequel. And then I was guessing that you would watch this movie and then you would find out near the end somewhere that this is the alternate timeline, that Loki's in charge, that he has the Tesseract, and that it suddenly can become a movie with stakes instead of a movie without stakes because of that. And suddenly you set up, an alternate universe where Loki's in charge and everything's pretty messed up. And you set up an alternate universe where everything turned out great because Captain America stopped the JFK assassination and the Twin Towers, and he prevented Chernobyl. Suddenly everything is just awesome in Captain America's alternate dimension that he created. And then you kind of have this Paragon Earth and this Loki Earth, and she's trapped in that one, and you can kind of interweave her back in. Because if they want to make more movies about her, it feels like you need stakes.
And I hope you're right, or I hope some version of that is right.
Yeah.
Because you referred to Endgame as giving really good send-offs to the two characters who were leaving. She also left.
Didn't.
And did not get anything remotely resembling a send-off, which leads me to assume that they are still planning to do a lot more with her than just one prequel.
Right, and she went through the ringer in Endgame, right? So that's my hope, right? That we get that, and then they kind of fix the time travel thing by saying we created a whole new problem that is huge and we didn't understand. Loki rules an entire dimension now, and that's real bad.
I don't think he rules a dimension.
Yeah.
I think the version that escaped with the Tesseract got caught by Owen Wilson in the Loki trailer.
Okay.
And
I haven't seen the Loki trailer. I didn't watch it.
It looks so good. It looks basically like evil, slightly effeminate Doctor Who, and I have never been more down for a concept than that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be really awesome. I intentionally just didn't watch it because I'm like, I'm going to watch this show. So
yeah.
But that was my hope with that. And I think I'm going to be wrong, right? But I kind of hope I was right. I was right on one really big thing in WandaVision that I'll tell you afterward.
Oh, I'm excited to hear that.
The surprise at the end of episode 5, I had called to the writing group episodes before. And
which was
really vindicated when it happened.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
So, hooray for that.
Who knows if they're going the place that it appeared they were going, because 6 makes it unclear. But anyway, we will talk about that after. Maybe we should do more questions.
I think we have a good theme going.
Are we down for
people want to hear two writers talk about
pop culture?
They're calling it really chill.
Okay.
So, I want you guys to rank the 3 Indiana Jones movies.
This is not
3 Indiana Jones movies.
This is not hard.
Bite your tongue.
What? This is
there
not hard.
There are 4. We are grown-ups. We can admit it.
Well then,
also
4 is the worst.
Also, it's clearly the worst.
It's so much the worst that there's
this one,
so
I don't know if there's
down
even a lot of disagreement on this,
right?
Because in order from worst to best, we have 4, and then 2, and then 3, and then 1.
Yeah.
2 is way better than the majority of you remember
Yes,
it being.
it is good.
It
and
is.
it does good things, does some things better than the other two that the other two just don't do.
Yeah, part of the problem is that, when Lucas and Spielberg got together to make 1, they were playing with several tropes from old-style serials and pulp. And when they got together to do 2, they played with all the ones they didn't get around to using in 1, which is not what anybody wanted. It's a much better movie than people remember, but it's not honestly a great sequel for that reason.
Well, and it doesn't quite hold together as well as 1 and 3. And again, here, 1 is the best, but 3 is my favorite.
Yeah.
Again, Sean Connery's performance pushes it over the top for me of 1. The humor between the two of them provides humor that I just really love. But 1 is a better film.
1 is...
The opening of 1. Like, I've used that... Like, one of my favorite things in cinema of all time is how, if you watch the opening 1, it starts with the Paramount logo, right? The mountain. And then it shows the mountain in real life, and it fades into that, and that's cool. But then Indy covers the mountain by stepping into frame, and there is this sort of sense that he is bigger than the movie company and the mountain and the geologic features, and instantly you're on board.
Very Sergio Leone in that sense.
That cut is so brilliant.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, for my money, is the single greatest action movie ever made.
Okay, I would put Die Hard in that position myself.
And that is definitely in the pantheon.
Yeah, but man, the cinematography in Indiana Jones is just so amazing. There's so many shots like that where it's like the way that the shot is framed reinforces who the characters are and what's happening. And everyone talks about that great shot where Indy shoots the guy with the swords. What they don't talk about is how they very deliberately framed that as a comedy shot with the wide, flat shot with lots of space around him so that you would know to laugh, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just a brilliant improv thing. I'm sure that, like, all right, let's make sure we use the wide shot on that one and make it...
like if we're going to make this work, we have to do it this way and frame it properly.
It's not just improv, it's great filmmaking, using these cues to tell the viewer. It's sorts of things that it's really hard to do in books that we don't really do the same way because, a flat wide shot is not a book thing, but I just love seeing filmmakers do stuff like that. And so...
Definitely. We'll also give a little shout out to the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles as long as we're talking about it.
Yeah, better than deserves to be mentioned.
Yeah, I liked that show a lot.
Harry Potter movies or books?
Harry Potter movie. I haven't even seen all the Harry Potter movies because they just got so boring.
I would say that my favorite is the same movie and book, 3.
Okay.
Because, again, time shenanigans notwithstanding, time shenanigans ruin other parts of the story, not generally the story they're in, right? But the emotional thing with Harry and his father and all of that and Lupin and stuff is just so good.
Yeah.
And
the director, Alfonso Cuarón, is the only one in the entire series that is trying to make an interesting movie instead of just recreate the book.
I don't blame, like, Chris Columbus, right? Because I have a feeling there were a lot of cooks.
Oh yeah,
and
frankly,
J.K. Rowling, and the first 2, they played very safe, and they are the worst of the movies because they filmed them like books instead of movies. Yeah. And 2 is one of the weaker books already, but 1's a very strong book, and it turned into a pretty weak movie in them. And so
good enough to launch a franchise, but it would have had to be pretty bad.
Yes.
It would have had to be lightning thief bad to not launch that franchise.
And I think that what went right is that book 3 was suddenly too big to do that with, and so the cooks I see out externally, I could be wrong, are like, well, we have to adapt this one rather than just film it scene by scene. And that let the director get away with things like humanizing the kids a little bit more with their clothing by making them look like they're actually wearing, like they're kids, and chopping the plot up and hitting the best moments. I like the book and the movie the best.
Yeah, I actually, as much as I love 3, I would probably say 5 is my favorite movie, which is the opposite of you because 5 is my least favorite of the books.
Actually, I think 5 is the most improved from book to movie. So I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, did not like book 5 at all. I mean, it's a really fantastic depiction of 14-year-old angst, but I did not want to spend, 150,000 words with a bunch of angsty 14-year-olds. And 5, Umbridge is the best villain in the series.
Right, and they nailed
and
Umbridge.
they did her so well. They did the twins so flawlessly.
Yep.
They did a lot of things really, really well.
Yeah, 5 definitely the most improved. I would say 3, 4, and 5 are my favorite movies, followed by 6, 7, and 7, followed by 1 and 2. And I wouldn't be able to distinguish 6, 7, and 7 very well from one another.
I watched most of 6 and just found it so dull and dry and slow, and I didn't watch 7 or 8 at all.
I found the first Fantastic Beasts movie unwatchable. I actually turned it off. We paid for it.
I haven't even tried.
We got Emily and I got 40 minutes in or a half hour, and we're like, this is boring, and we just turned it off. And so there was, I felt no sense of wonder, oddly, and the actor was fine, right? But the writing for that character in that movie was so really bizarre and didn't just, all the stuff that I talk about being great with like the framing and the narrative telling you and these things, just that movie didn't do. And I didn't know, is he an action hero? Is this a comedy? It seems like a comedy, but a lot of the shots and musical cues tell me it's an action movie. Everything seems empty. There seem to be no people around. The score feels flat, and I just don't know. Everything just was off in that movie for me.
Landing John Williams to do the Harry Potter score in the first movie, I think he doesn't get enough credit for helping launch that series.
Yeah.
Because the first movie is pretty dull and one of the worst ones, but the soundtrack for it is just absolutely magical.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Man.
It's interesting that Fantastic Beasts didn't have a sense of wonder, because I think that's one of J.K. Rowling's biggest strengths overall as a writer. She can add sense of wonder to the smallest, dumbest things that any other author would just kind of phone in.
Is she going to be writing a book about me, or?
You're not small.
That's true. That very true. True statement.
No, that's it. It's so bizarre. Watching that movie, the first half, I know there are people who like it, and the things they like about it, I can see why they did, right? So I'm not calling you a fool if you like that movie, but the thing about it is, it's like I felt like I was watching episode 1 again, where Lucas had lost his way and forgotten how to make his own movies. I felt like I was watching J.K. Rowling not understand what made her books fun, coming back to it later on, and just somehow being oblivious. And I don't know how much can be placed on her. She wrote the script, and she was very heavily involved in making that film. And so I wonder if just having her be in charge too much and just not know filmmaking, right?
Yeah, well, and I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to it, but I wonder if some of it is just that it is a story about adults instead of a story about kids, and loses the sense of wonder, because there isn't room for chocolate frogs and baseball cards with moving faces on them, and all those wonderful little details that fill in the corners of the world.
They call muggles no-mages.
Which is
just
hilarious.
So...
That is the most British possible word, and yet that's apparently the American slang for muggles.
And it's like, let's drain the life and fun out of this world and use the really, I don't know, just It was so weird watching it. It was the weirdest experience I've had in a long time in a film, just because I'm like, well, why don't I like this? I don't like. It's not that I hate it. I'm just so bored. Why?
Interesting.
Why?
Almost makes me want to watch it, but I'm not going to.
We can have when my theater's done. We can have a bad movie night and watch it. Maybe that'll make it fun. It might not work, right? Like some movies are great bad movie nights. Star Trek V, just a fantastic bad movie night because just the actors are all competent, but the movie just is silly
and endlessly quotable in its badness.
Yep, and the fact that once you find out that William Shatner wrote and directed it, just there's so many things about that movie make sense.
There we go.
So.
All right, what do they want us to rank next?
Should we do the Lord of the Rings books and movies?
Oh,
this
it's
is
so hard for me
harder,
to think of them as separate entities.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Dan on that. Like I have said many times, I prefer Helm's Deep to Minas Tirith as a plot structure. I love the plot structure of Gandalf coming back and warning them ahead of time, and that all just worked so well for me. And then Minas Tirith with the ghost showing up feels like more of a Deus Ex Machina.
That definitely, for me, is the weakest moment of the entire trilogy.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the Charge of the Rohirrim
is great.
Literally made me cry. So.
And Sam carrying Frodo is that's probably my top moment in all of them. And so, but really, they're one movie again, right?
Yeah.
Like they really are one movie.
They are. That said, Two Towers, I have the special edition autographed by Andy Serkis. So that is going to take top honors in my head, even though I probably like Return of the King more.
So, but they're really one movie. And the Hobbit movies are just painful. So painful.
So bad.
So very painful.
Ending the second one.
Yeah.
With the dragon flying off.
Yeah.
After we watched this just stupid Rube Goldberg machine of idiocy, while the dwarves are trying to melt gold and do whatever. And then, to kill Smaug, spoiler warning, 3 minutes into the third movie, before the credits have even rolled, I can't even fathom the decision-making process behind that.
Lindsay Ellis has a really good video essay series on this that I would recommend to everyone. They're great. She interviews a cast member.
She's brilliant in general, and her Lord of the Rings stuff is great.
Yep, good introduction to Lindsay Ellis. But the Hobbit, wow, it's just... What it tells me is that anytime we get a really good movie out of Hollywood, it's like a gem that just accidentally worked. I'm joking, but it's really like the fact that we have Lucas, we have Lord of the Rings, we have Harry Potter, all three of which had real trouble doing the same thing again, even with a lot of the same people involved. Just shows how difficult movies are to make, how many things can go wrong, and how much that balance of meddling versus not meddling, because I do think you need meddling.
If you don't have meddling, you get Fantastic Beasts, where it is one person's untouched vision. The thing with Lord of the Rings is that as time goes on, it is becoming more and more obvious how miraculous that trilogy really is. Because all three movies are incredibly good.
Yep.
There's, with the arguable exception of that Army of the Dead kind of...
Like, that's the worst movie, and that's a great moment in any other movie.
Everything in it works. The characters work. The character relationships work. They have character arcs. On top of that, it is an action movie that is about tenderness and the importance of hope and the importance of... like how many other action movies are there men who hug each other?
Yeah.
That never happens.
Right.
It's so good.
Like, I mean, my mom liked them. My mom has not liked a single Star Wars movie. They're just not her, right? She doesn't, all of this sci-fi explosion stuff, she just doesn't like. It's fine. But she loved Gollum. She went to those movies saying, what's going to happen to little Smeagol? I got to find out. Smeagol's story was compelling to my mother in ways that, other action movies just don't pull off. And they transcend genre.
I remember at the time, Return of the King tied the record for the most Academy Awards.
Yep.
And there were a lot of people who threw a big fit about it. But I think history is proving that to be the right decision, which history rarely does with the Oscars.
Yep. Or any awards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was up against some big, big stuff, too. And I can't even remember what some of them were, but yeah.
Yep. So,
anyway.
They are brilliant works of art, and it also is why I am such a big, strong defender of the MCU. Despite it needing no defense, it has become really popular to hate on it because it's so popular, right? Like,
yeah, it has taken over the movie industry.
Yes, and
in
so
a very real way.
It's easy to be like, hot take, they aren't as good as you think. And I respond with, not so hot take, I know it's, but it is a miracle that there is one stinker in the entire thing, and that's the Hulk movie, like, the second one they made or whatever, right? Like, the fact that...
Second Iron Man and second Thor are not great either.
I rewatched, it's great. I like it. It just doesn't have a third act. If they had been able to make Iron Man 2 with people trusting them so he could be an alcoholic instead of the other thing, it would have been great. But it is not a bad movie. It is better than any... And
my prediction, Sam Rockwell's coming back. I don't know in what capacity, but he'll come back because the MCU loves bringing back characters.
It's actually, now, the Thor movie, okay. There's still some fun stuff,
There's still some very good stuff in it.
It is in my opinion, second weakest of them all.
It's the first movie, I think, ever where Natalie Portman got to play an adult.
Yeah.
And I love it just
and some
for
of that
alone.
teleporting stuff and stuff made really fun action scenes. And I think there's only one legitimate stinker. And that's like talking about how hard this is and the fact that they don't have it's just remarkable that they're an entire series of solid 7s with a few 6s and a couple 8, 9, and 10s.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
Rare, especially over, what is it now, 23 movies?
Yeah.
James Bond doesn't even have that kind of record.
No.
Been around for decades. Before we totally leave Lord of the Rings, I do have to say, earlier I talked about two of my favorite role-playing games, which are Star Trek Adventures and Pendragon. The third one in the Holy Trinity, in my opinion, is The One Ring, which is an absolutely incredible Middle-earth role-playing game that has, the idea of hope is important. It's not an action movie. It's about maintaining hope in the face of shadow. Really well done.
So I've got a philosophy here on why good movies, the movies that should be good, go bad sometimes. Okay? And it's going to be self-serving. So it's coming from my frame of reference, which I am willing to acknowledge is very biased, so I could,
Okay.
But I feel like Hollywood does not have a good apprenticeship program for writers. And what I mean by this is writers are either disposable. They write a screenplay, and then the director comes in and just makes a new screenplay. Or they write one really great script and get given a whole bunch of more work. And I think of my favorite writers, novelists. And you do not see the wild inconsistency in their work that you do in films with a lot of this. Terry Pratchett, consistently great, right? Granted, he's a rare talent, but that's not uncommon. My favorite writers, like Anne McCaffrey, consistently great.
Yeah.
And K. Jameson, consistently great. And you find, in my opinion, among novelists, much less, like I could find novelists where I can say, it's rare to find a non-8, 9, or 10, rather than rare to, you know what I mean? Like that,
Yeah.
and I think it has to do with the fact that very little in Hollywood you get what happens at Pixar, which is, Pixar is one of those that's been able to be consistent for a long time.
Yeah.
And they have this sort of apprenticeship program where someone works on a little film, one of their shorts, and then they are assistant on a film, and eventually they're given their own, but there's a whole story team helping them, and you get this really great collaboration where a screenwriter or a director is really allowed to kind of fail safely with safety nets to help them understand how they failed so they can do better next time. And I think of early in my career, I don't know if you noticed this about yourself, but during this time of my writing career, I was getting good, but I was inconsistent as an unpublished writer. I would write an Elantris, and then I would write another book after it that didn't quite understand why Elantris worked because I wasn't aware of my own process enough. And once I started being able to write some good books, the next 5 to 6 years of my life were about learning to do that consistently. And if a book turned out to be not good, knowing how to fix it, rather than, just being like, well, I guess we'll just release it and see. And I feel like that doesn't happen in Hollywood. I feel like if you go look at screenwriters on a lot of things, there are very few. You're not going to find a lot of screenwriters, for instance, who have written 35 produced movies. Like I've written 35 books.
Yeah.
You just aren't going to find a ton. And there are some people. There's your Terry Rossios, right? And his writing partner. And there's William Goldman. And you're going to find people like that. The screenwriters the Rousseau brothers work with are really good and consistently great. But you don't find very many of those. You find people who have like 3 or 4 credits. And they've only been able to actually get a movie made a couple of times. Maybe they had one really great screenplay, but they haven't had this apprenticeship where they've learned how to fix their weaker screenplays. And then they release a dud, and then they're kicked out of Hollywood, essentially. Can't sell anything anymore. They aren't allowed to learn.
Yeah.
And it just chews through talent and spits it out the other side, half-formed.
Well, and, maybe this is a weird comment to make given your earlier disparaging of TV. TV does have that system.
Yes, it does.
And not only does it have an apprenticeship system, but it has the freedom to fail.
Yeah.
Because if you write a bad episode of Law and Order, then there's still 5 million more episodes of Law and Order that they need to crank out. And it didn't cost as much as a movie. And there's all this
And you're part of a
safety net
writer's room.
all around you.
Right? Like, my problem with TV is that it is a format my tastes don't like. That doesn't mean that the screenwriters aren't great. That traditional network episodic television just doesn't tell stories the way I like. Just like I don't like to eat fish.
Yeah. Which
and so-
is another thing that he and I have argued about for 22 years. Okay, so I now that we're talking about TV shows again, I have to ask you
Yeah.
if you watched The Queen's Gambit.
I did not. I've heard good things about it, but I have not watched it.
It's the best TV show I've seen in a very, very long time, which doesn't necessarily mean you would like it.
Yep.
It doesn't have the episodic problem that you are kind of chafing against. But...
And it's pretty short, right? Like it's one of these
I want to say
6 episodes?
7 episodes.
Yeah.
Well, somewhere in that ballpark.
which is something that I like.
Yeah.
Like people keep telling me that I really love Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I agree with them. There's a decent chance I will like it, but it's episodic television in a format I just don't like. I watched a few episodes. I'm like, I just don't like the style of storytelling, and it's like,
There's 3 seasons of 22,
Yeah.
25 episodes each.
and they're like, watch it until it gets good, and I'm like, I don't do that anymore in my life. That's not a thing
There's
that I
too
do.
much good TV to force yourself to acquire a taste like that.
Yeah, and so.
No, Queen's Gambit, there
Yeah.
was a moment early in the first episode where I thought, oh, this is going to be more crass than I want to watch. And then it wasn't. And it's 7 episodes long, and
I've heard really great things.
Really, I loved it. I can't remember the last time I loved a fictional story that much. I also am a huge fan of Chernobyl.
Right.
Like Chernobyl, that TV series, again, was like 6 episodes long. Queen's Gambit and Chernobyl are the best things I've seen on TV in probably 6 or 7 years. Absolutely loved them both. Okay.
So,
what do we got?
do we want to rank Christopher Nolan movies?
Christopher Nolan movies.
I
haven't
love
seen all of them,
Christopher
is the
Nolan,
problem.
so
I haven't seen Interstellar, so I don't know where to put it.
so I can rank Christopher Nolan movies. They're all awesome and they're all weird.
I will disagree with you that they're all awesome because he made The Dark Knight Rises.
I like Dark Knight Rises. Okay,
you're
maybe
wrong.
not awesome. That one might not be. It's still kind of awesome. It's still better than any of the other DC movies I've seen.
And you have to give him a little bit of a break because
Yeah.
he had to rewrite the story after Heath Ledger died. Because Heath Ledger was supposed to be in that movie.
He was supposed to be in it?
So
Scarecrow
Okay.
was to replace Heath Ledger, so
So-
they didn't have the same.
I mean, that
Scarecrow
movie's
was in it?
fine. That movie's fine. Yeah, he's
No,
running
it's
a-
not fine. It's
I-
so bad.
It's not so bad.
Make me cry. That is the only movie I can think of that asks me to believe that like 70 cops just hung out in a cave for how many weeks doing nothing, picking their noses, and then came out and waged a massive street battle in perfectly clean clothing. I don't buy it. And that's not even the dumbest thing in the movie.
See, I think it's stronger than the first one. But I dislike the first one more than a lot of people do.
That is weird.
But again, I like them all. I like his filmmaking style. I probably enjoy watching Christopher Nolan in the same way that you know, my friend Alan loves to watch Star Wars even if the movie is right. Like we argue about Rogue One because I'm like, the plot in this is just incomprehensible. It makes no sense. He's like, yeah, but X-wings, right?
You know, and yes, but X-Wings is a legitimate defense of
And
something.
for me, it's, yeah, but weird nonlinear storytelling and odd shots and kind of bizarre uses of the camera and interesting passage of time, and that sort of stuff's fun to me.
So if you like them all, what's the best one?
Oh, boy. What's the best or what's my favorite? So that's going to be
Okay.
like...
You keep differentiating
Yeah.
those two, which I find kind of cute.
so,
Because I do the same thing. Like, and I wonder if that is a sign of arrogance on our part as storytellers, that we're like, this is my favorite one, but for professional reasons, I have to admit that this other one is better.
No, it's more like I can admit that at a certain point, taste for an individual overrides good storytelling mechanics. And certain films and books make really great choices from structural or character sorts of decisions. But I emotionally connect individually with something else. And then I've noticed that a lot of other people don't have that same thing. It's basically like you're like, who is the best chef in the world? I might be able to say that, Jiro who makes the sushi, maybe he's the best chef in the world. And I could look at technically all of them, but I just don't like sushi. So
Yeah.
it's not going to be my favorite. It's that sort of way with me. When I look at like Star Wars 1, I think is technically, or 4, whatever,
Yeah.
the strongest movie. Just from the innovations it made, the shots that it uses, the tightness of the narrative, the overlapping of character arc and plot arc. It's just really, really great. But I just love lightsaber battle between Luke and Vader, and I'm going to go choose that one to watch.
I just think it's so interesting because I do the same thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's something in the back of my head saying that I shouldn't discount those kinds of emotional preferences and connections because that's the whole point. Like,
Well,
that's
yeah.
why we make art, right?
But at the same time, this is a good discussion. Like, I'm gonna take Tenet as an example. I
Okay.
really like Tenet. I would not recommend Tenet to my father. Why? I think my father would hate it because the things I love about Tenet are the things that are quirky about Christopher Nolan cranked up really high and that doing them really well in interesting ways that I appreciate. I think that my father is going to much prefer The Prestige, which you can follow a lot better, right? Or
Forgot that was a Nolan.
you know, probably Batman 1, right? That's if you're just going to make a recommendation, Batman 1. Why not 2? Because 2 requires so much emotion. Like it's draining, and certain people just have a terrible time with 2 because of how brutal and harsh it can be on your emotions. And 1 is good Christopher Nolan, well written, has a dopey ending, but does his sort of, like we're gonna have a character, we're gonna pass a lot of time, and we're just gonna do some interesting, cool things with what would normally be a by the numbers movie, but keep the by the numbers stuff. So I can be like, that's a great movie. I can recommend that to anyone. I can say to my dad, you'll like this. Come watch it with me. But Tenet, I have to be like, all right, let me talk about why I love this movie.
Yeah.
You're probably going to hate it.
I have to prep you for
Yes.
this. Okay,
Right.
so if we assume then that there is some kind of, platonic ideal of a Star Wars movie or a Nolan movie or whatever, and that can be mathematically figured out, like in Dead Poets Society, what's that one? And then what's your favorite one?
Okay. Okay. Batman 1, probably.
Okay.
Maybe, see, here's the thing. 2 is technically superior because it's doing much harder things, more interesting narratives, and has better performances. So Dark Knight, but at the same time, Dark Knight's structure is really strange, right? With like 4 endings. It has like that opener with the Joker is one of the best sequences in cinema, where each person is killing the person before them and whatnot with the payoffs.
Then
at the
he
end.
takes the mask off and is a clown underneath
Yes, it just so well done.
it. Yeah.
And so
My sister, by the way, and her husband hate Dark Knight because of that scene,
yeah,
which is wildly
so.
contrary to my own
But
experience.
I think 2 is the best of them and my favorite Christopher Nolan film, followed very closely by Tenet and The Prestige, hovering kind of in the same area, where I would have to see Tenet more. It's more fresh. My instinct says I like The Prestige more, but I really had a blast with Tenet. So who knows?
Now that's interesting to me because I haven't seen Tenet and I haven't seen Interstellar, and so I don't know where I'd put those. I did not like The Prestige really at all. It didn't work for me.
I really like it, but I really like the book.
And I haven't read it. So.
And it's a really brilliant adaptation of the book, where the book uses textual things and the movie uses cinematic things to achieve the same thing. It's like such a great way to adapt something that is kind of unadaptable. But I really like it. I really like the performances. I really like the structure. I think the payoff is great, and naming it Prestige and then having it be about the payoff of an interesting twist is really cool to me.
I don't know. The twist did not land for me.
It does land a little better in the book because the book is epistolary. Ooh, dinner's here.
Hey.
And so you're reading the journal from the 2 twins, and they're alternating, and you don't know it.
Interesting.
And it's real cool.
That's cool.
So read the Prestige book. It's real cool.
I would put Dark Knight also as my favorite. But if I were to pick which one is the most perfect expression of the Nolan aesthetic, it would actually be Inception.
Oh, Inception. Yeah, you're right.
I think he does.
No, you're right. Inception. Yeah. Like I can show Inception again. It's very Christopher Nolan.
You can show it to almost anybody,
right.
and
Inception
it does
great.
all of the things that he likes to do in a way that is accessible.
Yeah.
Which, though I haven't seen Tenet, according to most of the reviews, it isn't nearly as accessible.
Yeah. I like Tenet probably more than Inception because it's basically all that stuff done to the nth degree. Like all the Christopher Nolan stuff. Weird playing with time. Oh boy. No characters. Oh boy. Right? I'm exaggerating. There are characters, but you don't do backstory. You don't do, it's very lean and focused on the person in the now. How about that? The character in the now. interesting, complicated plot that does nonlinear storytelling in really cool ways. But Inception's really good, actually.
I'm surprised neither of you have mentioned Dunkirk.
Well, I was just about to
Dunkirk
mention
is
Dunkirk.
really good, too.
Because neither of us even brought it up. And
Well,
I wonder if that's because it's the one that's not science fiction.
No, I was going to
We're
get
big
there.
nerds.
I mean, I love Dunkirk. It's, again, the same sort of stuff, right? No characters.
No
Well, I'd say no
characters, play
characters
with time.
in a joking way.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't even have names.
They don't have names. It's fidelity to, like, in some ways, it's one of the most Nolan movies because, so I understand, like, I know he filmed at Dunkirk Beach, right? But I believe that the plane landing at the end was an actual period plane being flown without power, landed by an expert period pilot. Like, that's just insane, right? Like, that is so Nolan. That, yeah.
Made a great shot,
so
though.
not Nolan, but World War I funky movie. What did you think of 1917?
I have not seen 1917.
Okay, well, I would be
Yeah,
interested.
I know. I know it's supposed to be really good.
I actually didn't really like it.
Okay, that's an interesting.
It is for me. First of all, I was never not aware of the camera tricks it was pulling
Okay.
to make it look like a single shot. Like
Okay.
they were all glaringly obvious.
Okay.
Maybe it's because
Right. Everyone else feels like it's a long take, but you're just like,
yeah,
they just had someone
the
walking in front of
gimmick
the camera.
was so present that
Yeah.
I couldn't not be thinking about it all the time. And then it's also, this is what we were talking about earlier with structure and pacing. It isn't a story. It's just a bunch of stuff that happens. It doesn't lead to anything, and there is no payoff at the end. And it just kind of stops instead of concludes.
Which is actually a really good vote for why Dunkirk is so great, because that one could have just concluded too, right? Mm-hmm. But by having the plane land and having like the send off that guy who makes Shakespeare movies gives
Kenneth Branagh.
Kenneth Branagh's performance there at the end and stuff, like it really feels like it's very poetic. So I really like Dunkirk. I watched it at Dunkirk. Actually,
really?
Yeah, in France.
That's cool.
In this, staying. I guess we were outside. It was the day before we visited Dunkirk. I watched the movie, and
Neat.
I think it's really cool. So there's an argument for Dunkirk ahead of Inception, because that historical grounding might be enough. Like if there's a problem with Inception, it's again my father being like, "What's happening? Wait, I don't understand what they're doing
a
or
little
why."
bit, but see, I would go the other way and say that if you were trying to pick the Nolan movie,
Yeah, okay.
it would have to be science
Okay.
fictional.
Yeah, okay. Nolan movie, I will agree. It's Inception. I'm with you there. I really do like, but I mean, I like Nolan's films. I like his aesthetic, right? I like Interstellar. I like it quite a bit. But Interstellar is like this. See if I can explain. Both Interstellar and Tenet are this way. I really like Miyazaki's films, right? Particularly kind of the high Miyazaki area when he did Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, right? And then a few years later, he did the movie called Ponyo, which is, and we all sat and watched that movie together, and all of us, my wife and my friends and people, we were all kind of like Miyazaki, and the whole movie we were like, oh, that wacky Miyazaki. He made just a wacky Miyazaki movie. And the whole time we were charmed and enjoyed it, but our response was, oh, you goofy Miyazaki. Here's a Miyazaki, and that's in Interstellar to me. I'm like, oh, Christopher Nolan, you doing your goofy Christopher Nolan thing, and Tenet's kind of the same way.
It's the point in the repertoire where they kind of let themselves get carried away with their own style.
Right, and because of that, I can't rank them as high as something like Inception or Dunkirk, where I wasn't paying attention to it being Christopher Nolan. I was paying attention to the story he was telling, and the choices he were making were enhancing the story and narrative in such a way that it was invisible to me. Dunkirk is especially that way, right? Like the non-linearness is so. I've never seen any book or film do linearness like he did in Dunkirk. For those who don't know, there's one plot line that's happening over the space of a week, one that's happening over the space of a day, and one that's happening over a space of a couple hours. And they're all intercut, and you're watching them all converge on a single moment. But more time is passing between.
And that was fascinating to me to watch, in part because that's kind of the same thing that you were doing with the end of Wheel of Time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but accidentally, because we had to split the one book into 3. So I did it. I wasn't doing it to be a cool nonlinear thing. I was doing it to be like, how can I make this as invisible as possible, that a lot of time is passing in one and not the other and converging on the same point? Because in the original draft I was writing, they actually were all chronological. And when I had to split the book, I couldn't just split it 1, 2, 3, because what you'd end up with is this art, what we were talking about before, where the first one is all set up and no payoff. The second one is all
just middle stuff.
Middle conflict, and instead pulling out the arc of one character, of a couple characters, and then doing a parallel novel that's an arc of other characters where they converge, and then a big one at the end. Structurally, it works like a tripod, right? Except with 2 legs. Anyway, it holds up that ending way better, and structurally would have been a disaster to just, not a disaster, I'm sure people would have enjoyed it just fine, but it was way stronger as a parallel narrative, where basically I ended up having to write kind of something like Ender's Shadow, where it's like a parallel novel to another novel, and not let you focus on that, and not let you be confused by it. And in Dunkirk, it's a selling point, right?
Yeah.
It basically tells you we're only going to be with any scene when interesting, exciting things is happening. And the fighter pilot's exciting all the way through, but the other one, they're going to have days where they sit around and do nothing. So we're going to skip that and cut it together, so you're only seeing the exciting parts, and it's really cool. It's just really cool way to tell a story.
And such a Nolan way to tell a story.
It's such a Nolan way to tell a story, but it is shocking to me that I could watch a film and be like, I have never seen that structure used before. Why haven't I? It's a really great idea for a structure, and I'm sure it's been done. I haven't seen Cloud Atlas, but I hear it does some of the same sorts of things, converging toward a moment.
I haven't seen that one either.
But I just had not experienced it before, so hat off to Nolan on that. I like that he does this stuff, right? Like Tenet, you just have to go into it being like, this is a bold movie to try to make, because it's going to lose a lot of people, and even those who stay with it the whole time, it kind of doesn't make sense, because any time travel paradox stuff is just really hard. Like paradoxes, you just have to sweep under the rug, and this is a story where everything is a paradox, right?
Well, and it was such a tricky one to release during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the only theater releases at all during the pandemic, and like the worst one they could have chosen. Because that is a movie that seems to depend on, you loved Interstellar and Inception, come see this one too. And the only people who went and saw it were the hardcore science
I had to rent a
fiction
theater,
nerds.
right? Because, COVID and stuff. And I can do that. It's not that expensive these days, but it's like $300, right?
Yeah, which if you have enough people to go with you.
Right, like the thing, like if people have what I consider a legitimate complaint about the Marvels, if they don't like them, one of the big legitimate complaints is, look, they're kind of safe. They do the same thing over and over again, even though they shake up the genre, the structure tends to stay pretty safe. And people just saying, I'm just, bored of that. It's a really good argument.
Yeah.
That's why things like Tenet should be upheld, because no one else is going to make that film.
Oh, yeah.
That film, you almost can say you shouldn't make that because it doesn't make any sense. The movie can't make sense. You cannot make Tenet make sense. You can follow the character arcs and things, but because of all the... And yet he did. And I'm so glad he did. I'm glad that we have movies like that. And Interstellar is the same way. When I got out of Interstellar, I said, there are a few things he shot for and missed. But the fact that he's aiming so high means the movie is a delight, because other people just aren't aiming high, because Hollywood doesn't let them. Well, other people want to.
And I almost feel like I have a moral obligation to see anything that's an original screenplay.
Yeah, exactly.
Because especially science fiction. Here's somebody who is trying really hard to do something new, like Moon.
Yeah.
I didn't think Moon hit everything it needed to hit, but it was somebody's new idea that hadn't really been done before, that was not based on something, as far as I'm aware, and that needs to be rewarded, whether it is successful or not.
Unless they're based on Brandon Sanderson books. You should look for new and original things that aren't based on anything.
I mean, if people just would make my stuff, then that
They did. You have a movie. You
I do
take
have
every
a
moment
movie.
to tell me that you have a movie, and I
and
don't.
it's a good movie.
It's a good movie. It's still on Netflix, isn't it?
No, it is not
Okay.
on Netflix anymore.
Well, everyone.
But you can get it
Watch
on
this
Prime
movie.
Video, and it's awesome.
Yes, it is really good.
Yeah. No, what I want is I want Netflix to pick up this series. Middle grade, this would make a phenomenal animated series.
It'd be really good with that. I mean, animation is kind of booming right now,
Yeah.
and everyone's looking for the next Avatar. So
Here we go.
Here we go.
I've got the next Avatar right here. All the movie producers that are watching this show.
Out tomorrow.
Out tomorrow. The third book is called Stargazer. You should all get it. You can't pre-order it now because it's not pre-orderable.
But you get it for
Audible
free.
Plus.
If you have an Audible subscription, you just get it.
You get it, and you listen to it, and it's full cast, music, sound effects, phenomenal production values, and it'll take like 5 hours because it's middle grade. So,
And do you want to tell people where they can get these books?
Oh, our website.
Yep.
I guess.
Store.brandonsanderson.com.
we now have books in stock again. I'm
Yes.
sorry they've been out of stock for 3 months or longer. I apologize for that. We now have them.
Yeah, they will go quickly. So if you want one,
Yeah,
you
in
should
fact, here's
go
a
jump
stack
on.
of ones that Dan has a story in that's very good.
oh yeah, we got Shadows Beneath over there.
We'll have Dan sign like 5 of these. What do you think?
That's a good idea.
Then you can buy one if you were like, hey, Dan.
You know, if you have been interested in listening to us talk about story structure and storytelling and what works and what doesn't, that's what this is. This is Brandon and I and Howard Taylor and Mary Robinette Kowal giving several different drafts of our stories, kind of transcriptions of brainstorming sessions of how and why we wrote the story and then how and why we revised them. So it is a very deep dive into how storytelling works, and it's really cool.
I sign on the next page on the full title, so I don't know if you want to sign on the same one or if you want to. Yeah.
I'm going to sign up above the title.
Yep. So you guys can get those. Each of us have a story in it. Mine is Six of the Dusk, which you might have already read, but if you want to see how Six of the Dusk came to be, you can read the brainstorming session. We transcribed that. You can read the early drafts, and you can see what I changed. It's a goofy thing that I came up with to do that is a very narrow level of interest for people.
Yeah, I think they're all kind of goofy stories.
Yeah, they are goofy stories, for sure.
Mine is about some soldiers in, I can't remember if I did Iraq or Afghanistan, probably Afghanistan, who are testing new technology that they realize is actually a supernatural creature that the military has harnessed as a minesweeper.
You were going to sign some posters from
Oh, yeah. As long as we're selling things. If you like these posters behind me on the wall, I have cover image posters for the first 2 of the Zero G books. And I brought some to give to Brandon's kids. You can get these from me as well. Look at my website, thedanwells.com.
So I signed this. Is this for the stream? Someone wanted me to write LOTR Saddle Strap Edition bookplate?
Yes, that's for, we have a foreign, someone got their Way of Kings overseas, and the ribbon has a tear in it. So instead of replacing the whole book, we're sending them
A bookplate that's a special.
That's
So,
funny.
You get your special bookplate. Yeah, that sounds like, I'll just put it up there. That sounds like a really cool thing. And you showed me stickers. Do we have these now?
They will start going out with the books tomorrow.
So if you order, we just tend to throw in stickers for fun. We have licensed the Jello Bird sticker from the comic. You might get a Jello Bird sticker, and we licensed this one too. The Shalon, what's his name?
Norman Rockwell.
Norman Rockwell thing where, she is all
Yeah, I
three.
haven't
So
seen
she has 3 altars. She has 2 altars of herself, and so she is looking and drawing and.
That's cool.
It's funny because Isaac was like, oh, somebody should totally do that. And then a week later, that girl posted it, and Isaac's like, I love it.
Yep. So you can't buy these from us. We just throw them in orders, right? So if you order books, you will get one of our stickers, probably one of these two nowadays. So.
You know, I
Other
should
people-
mention,
Yeah.
as long as we're selling stuff, that the Zero G series, while it is in audio, the first book has come out in print and ebook, and you can find that on Amazon.
Oh, cool. Did you self-pub those, or did you?
I initially self-pubbed them, and then I decided to go with a small press
Okay.
because I didn't want to have to do it myself.
Who did you pick?
I went actually with Alexi.
Okay. Yeah.
And I can't remember. It's like I
It's-
can't remember
it's
the name
Kevin
of
J.
his
Anderson's
his
old
small
company
press.
that he sold to Alexi, right?
Well,
Or did start his
Alexi
own?
didn't buy Wordfire.
Oh,
He bought the booth.
He bought the booth,
not
okay.
the publishing
and then he
brand.
has his own.
But then, when COVID hit,
Yeah.
so there's a guy that I work with who's kind of like my publicist, Alexi Vandenberg, who's a good friend of mine, and he has a bookstore that is actually a New York Times reporting bookstore that just goes around to conventions, and he does something like 50 Comic-Cons a year.
Bard's Tower, right?
Bard's Tower.
It's a really great.
It's really
setup.
great. I do, in a typical year, 10 or 12 Comic-Cons with him. And then this year, of course, there were no cons and there was no income stream of any kind for those of us that kind of rely on booth sales.
Yeah.
And so he started a small press, and so I went with him to pub these.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think we're out of time, right? Or we're over time. We're gonna get that dinner that arrived. That you guys all heard the
All
doorbell
cold
for.
now.
Yeah.
An hour ago.
Thanks for coming, Dan.
Hey,
Hanging
thank
out.
you for having me. This is always a delight. I would be happy to sit here slightly shivering while you sign 400 books. It's probably way more than 400 too, wasn't it?
Oh, we signed a bunch. So, take care, guys. I'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll see.
Yeah, with special guest Nick Martell.
Nick
He's gonna
Martell,
be- yeah.
whose debut came out last year.
Yeah, Kingdom of Liars, I believe.
It's a good book.
Yep. Anyway.
I cover blurbed it. So, yep. See you then.